Hello, this is for English 5388. Today's date is December 18th, 2017, and I wanted to wrap up the course. I wish I had done this earlier, but I didn't get to it. I know the number one question on everyone's minds is, what is my grade and what are the comments for my paper? I have just been in contact with the Canvas staff and just received an email that I chose a setting where my course would be hidden until I was done with final grades. They weren't sure how to reverse to unclick that box basically, but they have figured it out and I viewed it as a test student, so I think as of right now, you should be able to get into Canvas and see everything from the course. You might have to go into courses, or all courses and then past courses, so it may not show up in your dashboard like it did. But it should be visible to you. I've also submitted final grades, and so depending on when or how many evaluations you submitted, if you submitted all your course evaluations, you should see those now, I think. If you didn't submit all of them, then you don't get priority viewing, so on 11:59 p.m. on December 26th, you'll be able to view your university course final grades. Okay, so I finished grading everything. For your researched argument papers, I downloaded your document, I made marginal and end comments in the Word document, and then I uploaded it to Canvas. So you will need to download the document to see my comments on the researched argument paper, but not the short analysis paper. I only made a few marginal comments and an end general comment in the Canvas gradebook, so you don't need to download your paper to see my comments on your short analysis paper. But if you can't, for some reason, access my comments, then let me know and I'll send you the document or the screenshot or whatever. So I was really impressed with your work and learned about some really terrible people that you researched. I was glad, because this is the first time I've taught this course, that you did on your researched argument paper just what I wanted you to do, and it was cool to see your development over the course of the semester, from just learning these terms, trying them out, receiving some feedback about your understanding of them from me, from your classmates, and culminating in a research project that really combined your own analysis with research you had done that served various purposes and demonstrated your understanding of these parts of demagoguery. So for the most part, everything was really spot on. I tried to make some constructive criticisms and some praise in all the papers. And again, if you can't see that, let me know. There were three sometimes misunderstood terms that I wanted to go over again. Cunning projection, naive realism, and epideictic versus demagogic rhetoric. So cunning projection is not only pointing out what your outgroup is doing wrong, it's pointing that out and hiding or misdirecting or just omitting the bad actions that you or your in-group is participating in. So in the case of the slaveholders, the pro-slavery rhetors would direct attention to the bad actions of the abolitionists and say, they are causing revolt, they are hurting our manhood, they are tearing this country apart, and not acknowledging that they were complicit in slavery, which of course had all the evils that slavery does: separation of families, sexual assault, murder, abuse, everything. So they were in defense of this institution, but saying, no, we're not the ones causing problems, it's the abolitionists that are the problem here. Some of you identified cunning projection in George W. Bush's speech by saying something along the lines of, he's condemning the violence committed by these terrorists, but saying we're going to go get the terrorists, they'll be brought to justice. With the value of hindsight, we know that tens of thousands of civilians in the Middle East have been killed, depending on your interpretation, kind of as a result of the events on 9/11. Of course, it's much, much more complicated than that. But it was identifying an omission, excuse me, an omission of the possible equation of they've committed violence, we're going to also, but don't look at our violence, just look at their violence. So that could be seen as an example of cunning projection. For naive realism, some of you use this as a term that was a tool or something used by demagogues, but it's really more like confirmation bias, an information bubble. It's a way of seeing the world, so it's not a tool to be used. An example would be when we think about climate change, there are some people in the media or whoever who, especially during winter, will point to a pile of snow or point to even a large destructive storm like Superstorm Sandy and say, it's not warming up around here, we have had a really bad winter. Which is naive realism because there's tons of other evidence that as a whole the globe is getting warmer, and it's not just warming, it's the acceleration of not traumatic, events, catastrophic, acceleration of catastrophic events. And so your viewing of this pile of snow or a cold winter is not allowing other information to pierce that bubble. It can also be described as how privilege works, whether that's white privilege or privilege because you're tall, privilege because you grew up wealthy. It's because it disregards other sources of information that contradict your own personal experience. There are studies that show the effects of privilege. You could talk to people who don't have that same kind of privilege, and they'll give you a different story from what you've experienced. But it would be like you go shopping at a store and you go to check out. The clerk doesn't say, oh, by the way, I didn't follow you around the store thinking you were going to shoplift because your clothes look really nice or because you're a white person. But you don't hear what they don't say, basically. And it's not allowing other sources of information that would contradict your sense of what's real and what's obvious in the world. It's kind of blocking those off from your perception of the way the world really is. And finally, epideictic rhetoric is not necessarily demagogic at all. A lot of demagoguery is easier to identify within epideictic, which you could think of as ceremonial speeches, like funeral orations or this kind of State of the Union address that President George W. Bush gave, happy birthday speeches, toasts. But even some people say that literature is epideictic rhetoric. If you have to categorize it, it's not deliberative because it's not trying to make a policy decision. It's not forensic rhetoric because it's not doing what lawyers do. It's not trying to establish what happened. And it's really interesting to think of literary criticism as epideictic rhetoric, kind of having more to do with the values of the reading community rather than trying to decide something. But that's beyond my scope here. So demagogic rhetoric is about trying to decide how much to punish an outgroup, but epideictic rhetoric is not necessarily, doesn't have to be that at all. So they don't go together. They don't have a necessary relationship. So I just wanted to reiterate that because especially in the short analysis essay, a lot of you brought up epideictic rhetoric. Wrapping up the semester, and after reading the examples of demagogues or potential demagogues from your papers, I just wanted to harken back to the beginning of the semester in Dr. Roberts Miller's book, where she said it's, especially if you're in the outgroup and you might be helped by someone who others would say is a demagogue, it's hard to recognize when it's happening in your society. And demagogues do good by some of their constituents or by their measures. Like one person had the example of Huey Long, who was a Louisiana politician. he did some good by the people that he represented. He got lots of textbooks to students who didn't have them. He built bridges. He got some beneficial things done. However, he also tried to annihilate his political enemies and, some would say, like, create class revolution. So both of those things can be true. In modern terms, maybe you don't like the blaming of immigrants that President Trump does. You resist the scapegoating that others might identify, but you think he's doing a really good service to the economy by cutting the corporate tax. So it's, there are shades of gray, there's ambiguity. And hindsight gives us insight that that you don't get in the present day when things are happening. And especially things that maybe happen very quickly or maybe happen gradually. We see that a lot better after the fact. Also, I just wanted to point out that demagogues go by lots of different names. In today's media landscape, sometimes they're called bullies or narcissists or tough, decisive leaders, strong leaders, protectors, or authoritarians or dictators. And so you have a very valuable toolbox of deciding for yourself if you think someone who's trying to gain power or is in power has these tendencies of a demagogue, and what has happened or what could happen if they do achieve power and if they are able to enact division and punishment on some kind of outgroup. But I thought, remember, there's a section in the back of Demagoguery and Democracy when Robert Miller says, what should we do about it? And she, 94, 95, gives recommendations about maybe you can't argue at that moment with that person who's defending a demagogue, but maybe you can. Maybe you see room for persuasion. You can not consume media and try to get a media outlet to quit relying on demagoguery. And something that I think all of us are equipped to do now is argue that we should have fair arguments. We should back up a step and agree on how we're going to discuss these really tough policy issues or really tough problems that we're facing as a society. That there should be fairness in the way that we talk to each other about that. So that's about all I wanted to say about the course. I hope I can have some of you in my course in spring 2018, which is going to be a course I've taught several times before, History and Theory of Composition Studies. I think it's really good. A lot of students say that they benefit from it. I only am teaching part-time this semester and in spring because I'm undergoing treatment. I have stage 4 cancer and I've lost my hair now because of the drug that I'm on. And some delays were caused this semester by doctor's appointments or side effects or other related causes. So I'm going to try to have the same reduced workload in the spring so that I can focus on my health, but still teach, which is what I love to do. So I wish all of you happy holidays, happy break, and hope that I get to work with you again. If not, because I'm not sure what I'm teaching in next fall yet, keep in touch and let me know if I can do anything that helps you out in your class or in your life. Thank you for a great semester.